bit organized. We'll get going. So anyway, I'm Bob Downing. I work with the employment and inclusion team and also the UStep software development team. And I'll be just sort of facilitating our meeting today. So we'd like to welcome everybody for being here. Appreciate it. And we'll just kind of get going. The first couple of things though, just want to mention that some housekeeping stuff, that the meeting is being recorded. So please mute your microphones, and the slides for today should be available on our website on Friday. I think maybe somebody can put that in the chat for us, but it's under support coordinators on the DSPD website. I think most of you guys know where that is. And then also, if you have any questions, please type them into chat and we will have some time at the end to try to answer those for you. Okay, our agenda today is we're going to start out with a few announcements. We've got a brief presentation on some employment resources from our employment and inclusion team. We will go over some staff, DSPD staff changes. There's a new disability ombudsman who I believe will be with us and be able to introduce herself today. A little bit on legislative updates. A contract request that Tyler will mention to you guys. There's an updated directive about changing support coordinators for folks in our services. We'll have a finance team training and a guest presenter from the Utah State Board of Education Special Education Department. And I would tell you who that is, except it's a guest special. I do not know, folks. So we will find out who that is. All right. Couple of announcements quickly. The first one is just we've heard that our org chart was out of date. So we have now updated that. And so the org chart and contact lists have been updated on our website. And we'll be posting that in the chat. But again, that's just on the DSPD website under About DSPD. So just sort of another thing that we've heard about is just some difficulties finding placements. And so we do provide home and community-based services, and DSPD staff encourage the use of home and community-based settings. We continue to hear some requests about getting access to ICF's intermediate care facilities. And while this is an option for the individual, it's not a decision that should be made for the individual. So pursuit of an ICF should not be in response to provider capacity issues, and it should not occur without outreach and education involvement. We want to help you to find home and community-based options if provider capacity issues do exist. And we'd like to know if there's anything that we can do to help with that. And please reach out to residentialsupports@utah.gov if you need help, and we will then try to respond to you. And then the next announcement is just a reminder that with school back in session, DSPD services can't be provided to school-age children during the hours that they should be attending school. This is considered a duplication of Medicaid services. If a person has day supports in their budget to attend a summer program, those services should not be used to supplement during the school year. If an after-school program is needed, please submit an RFS rather than moving the funds allocated or allotted for the summer support. Couple other kind of questions or issues, or one is just with Leonard Consulting not being around anymore or not contracting with us anymore. We've heard that there are some, questions that or some information that needs to be retrieved from Leonard Consulting for employment verification. And so we've got two email addresses that will be, well, they're on the screen here. So you can either contact Hillary Leonard, and there's her email address, or Frank Leonard with those. And then the last announcement we want to make is that we're kind of excited that today at 1 o'clock, our people from our inclusion and employment team will be presenting at a national webinar. It's kind of cool. It's the first time that the National Center on Advancing Person-Centered Practices and Systems, or NCAPS, and the State Employment Leadership Network are doing a joint webinar. And they tend to put out really good material. And so our folks will be presenting at it, and this webinar will highlight successful person-centered approaches and tools for discussing employment. And we will be putting, if we haven't already, into the chat. You do have to register for this, and we know it's short notice. It's at 1 o'clock today, but anyway, we'll be putting that link in that you can register, and then you'll get the link to it today. All right, and now I am actually going to turn our time over to the same group that will be presenting at 1 o'clock, and they've got a quick presentation for you guys. Well, I don't know. They've got a presentation for you guys.
Yeah, Bob, if you want to go back one slide for just a second. Thank you. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's still morning for a little bit. Also, yes, we're excited to be part of this webinar and really excited to be asked. I was watching the chat, and we also want to mention that there is also going to be a parent speaking, as well as a support coordinator from a person in our services sharing their success story, in addition to some small pieces that our state staff are going to do. The announcement I want to make very quickly is just that it's National Disability Employment Awareness Month. That's the entire month. We've been gathering some success stories from many service providers and others over the past few weeks. In early September, we were doing quite a bit of that, and we are sharing them in a listserv email, which I think is being added to the chat right now. Welcome to join and see what those success stories look like. Also, this year we had a unique chance to highlight many job coaches and employment specialists that are doing some excellent work around the state. I say that because we're always open to more success stories. You guys are out there working with folks and know what those look like. So please submit more. We've got many other avenues and mediums we can share more success stories on social media, through some blogs and some other things. So please, we'd love to hear that. That's more important than sometimes than some of these small, policy adjustments. We want to hear the good success stories. I'll give some time to Mara Blackwater to talk about a new resource we've developed. Thanks.
Hi, and good morning, everyone. We have, like Brent said, we have a new guiding workflow and a quick reference guide on person-centered planning to share with you today. So the screenshot provided on this slide is the basic outline of my vision of adulthood. The full guiding workflow will be shared in the chat. To continue to improve our system and person-centered planning practices and employment-first efforts across the lifespan, a work group was created in October of 2021, focusing on post-secondary students with disability to successfully transition to adult services or employment. The work group consisted of representatives from the Utah State Board of Education, the Utah Parent Center, our state's parent training and information agency, the Utah State University Institute for Disability Research, Policy and Practices, and Vocational Rehabilitation. My vision of adulthood introduces a person-centered planning approach into the individualized education program, the IEP transition plan. At each step, the student is meaningfully involved in their IEP transition planning process by utilizing a person-centered planning tool or tools and involving their support team members by their roles and responsibilities. The student would go through each step of their transition plan supported by the important people in their life to reach their goal of a good life after high school, whether that be competitive and integrated employment, continued education, or community inclusion. The guiding workflow consists of 4 steps to prepare a transition age youth with disability for a good life after high school. So as you see on the screen, I'll go quickly over the steps. Step 1 is creating my vision, which is the pre-transition phase or step, where the student is using a person-centered planning tool to discover their interests, strengths, and their goals. Maybe talking with others about their plans for after high school, or maybe identifying who will be on their IEP support team. Step 2 is planning my vision, which is when the student is planning their transition goal using a person-centered planning tool provided and sharing that tool with their teams. And step 3 is making my vision happen, is where the IEP team supports the student by implementing the transition plan guided by the person-centered planning tools. And step 4 is living my vision. This is where the transition agency continues with their vision of a good life out of high school by updating those person-centered planning tools that they were using in high school, and maybe sharing it with their new team or adult services providers or their support coordinators. So on the next slide, I'll talk about this support team quick reference guide that goes along with my vision of adulthood. Next slide, please. So to provide information to support team members on the principles of person-centered planning, we created the support team quick guide to go along with my vision adulthood. The support team quick guide was adapted for team members who may be on the student's IEP transition team, like for example, educators, VR counselors, support coordinators, and service providers. The guide provides brief information on the principles of person-centered thinking and what person-centered planning looks like. Following that information is a 3-column table listing a picture of person-centered tools from my vision adulthood with a link and the purpose of and how to use each of the tools. And lastly, and how the support team can use the person-centered tool specifically for their assessments or plan, like their person-centered support plan, the PCSP with DSPD, or the individualized plan for employment, the IEP with vocational rehabilitation. So the next step for our employment team is to pilot my vision of adulthood workflow with the post-secondary student with disability and their families. We wanted to gather feedback on how the workflow is being used, and we just wanted to kind of see, if it's working and helpful for them. So back to you, Bob or Angie.
Bob, you might be on mute.
Thanks, Bryn. I was on mute. Thanks. Anyway, okay. So we've got some new staff we just wanted to announce really quick. So Jordan Tollison is a caseworker on the community transitions waiver team. Kara Rung, a lot of you probably know Kara, has a new position and she will handle the notice of agency action appeal process for the division. We've got a new waiver manager, Anna Velasquez. She came from the Department of Health and working on one of the waivers over there. Amy Nicholson, a support coordinator on the limited supports waiver team. Got a few new support coordinators on our assessment and transition team: Jody Kearney, Katie Miner, Shay Bingham, and Marianne Schmidt. We've got a new research consultant, Brett Peters, and the waiting list supports team has hired, I hope I get all the names correct, Alejandra Presidio, Jennifer Martinez, and Kristen Chapman to help manage ARPA funds for individuals on the waiting list. And now I think that we have Angie McCourt on with us. Angie, are you here?
Yes, I am.
So I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Angie, and what your new position is. We'll give her just a sec. I think there is some difficulties going on. If she is where I was earlier today, the network was not working well.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yes, I'm not at the Canon building. I'm at the Mesa for my technical skill set. So anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to at least virtually meet many of you, and hope that if you're in the area and never at the Mesa, please stop by. I am in a telework position, so I'm here Wednesdays and Thursdays, and would be happy to meet with any of you and discuss anything that you think the ombudsman position might do to assist you in your work with your cases or with your clients, or maybe if you're just assigned to some part of the process. So my name is Angie. I am the office director of the ombudsman programs. So I oversee other ombudsman programs, including the one that is involved with child protective services, as well as the long-term care facilities. My main focus, though, was I was hired to develop the disability ombudsman program. I guess I'm going to make a lot of assumptions, but hopefully many of you know that this is a program that has not existed until recently. And so with the passing of
Hey, Angie, it just got really garbled to.
We were given the funds to create this position to really engage and advocate and work with people with disabilities to make sure their rights are not being violated. Okay, so if I slow down, is that better?
I'm not.
Can you hear me? This is not fun. Bob, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, but it's pretty garbled and it's coming in and out. I don't know if it's proximity to your microphone or.
Oh dear. I've tried to maybe shift. I'm worried that it's just the general setup here that we're struggling with almost everything related to a computer at this office building today.
Okay, so
Has it
Angie,
gotten any better?
we can hear you now. The video is gone, but I think that's okay. But we missed the part about the legislation and how your office came to be. It was really
Oh, okay.
garbled there.
Okay, so let me maybe I tend to be
Sanji, I don't know if maybe you want to log off and log back on or something. And
Yeah, Bob, let's go ahead and move on
Okay.
to the next agenda item, and then hopefully Angie can get her network stuff figured out and maybe hop back on.
yeah, and I don't know if maybe Tyler is going to be on, I think, in a few minutes. He might be able to give a quick little background if Angie's not able to join us about how that position came to be. Not to put you on the spot, Tyler, but you may know the most about that. Okay, just wanted to give a quick legislative update. As you know, we're still early on in the process, and so there isn't a heck of a lot to say other than to let people know that the budget requests have been submitted to the governor's office. The governor will prioritize these along with all the other requests that he's gotten from all of the departments. And then he'll release his budget recommendations likely in December. And just kind of a reminder to folks, I know that this can be a little bit frustrating sometime, though, is that, you know, we're part of the executive branch of the state government. And so we can advocate for items that the governor puts in his budget, but we really can't advocate for other things. We can and will be responding to any questions that come from the legislature to us. And we also just know that you guys are, you know, can be advocating for your own priorities, and that's great. So anyway, the process has started. Things have been submitted to the governor's office, and we will then see what comes out of that. Okay, Tyler, are you here? Yep, there's Tyler.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thanks. And I don't know if you want to just touch on Angie's, how her job came, because I know it was a study that you guys worked on, and we'll see if she comes back. I don't know.
Yeah, so, and apologies in advance because the state is experiencing some network problems today. And so anybody that's in a state office is having problems. I'm on my hotspot. So if I get disconnected or garbled or anything, feel free to just move on to the next agenda item. But the only other thing that I would add to what Angie said is that it was based on a study that we conducted at the request of the legislature. And if you're interested in reading that study, it's on our legislative website on dspd.utah.gov. If you hover over the About menu, it's under legislative info. The agenda item that I am here to talk about today, though, is a request for information that went out recently. In the last couple of days, you should have received an email. All support coordinators, all external support coordinators should have received an email with a series of questions. So this was a result of two recent audits that DSPD went through, both our internal audit and the Office of Inspector General audit. As a result of those two audits, we're considering changes to the support coordinator contract, the SCE contract. And so our first step in that process was to hold focus groups. And a few months ago, we held a series of focus groups with people with disabilities and family members. And to follow procurement rules, our next step in the process is this RFI, or request for information, that you should have all received. There's a series of questions. You should have received an email from SciQuest with a series of questions, and you can follow the instructions in that email to respond to those questions. The deadline is November 9th. And if you did not receive that email, you can send me a request, tdblack@utah.gov. Just let me know that you didn't receive it and I'll send it to you. Once we receive all the feedback, we will move forward with the next steps in amending the SCE contract. But because of procurement rules, this is our way of soliciting your input on any changes to the contract. So make sure that you're looking at those questions and giving your input. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bob to talk about a new process for switching between support coordinators.
All right, thanks, Tyler. Okay, just wanted to give you guys a heads up. Some of you may be aware of this already, but when a person wants to switch between support coordinators, so we've been revising our process to provide more structure and consistency when someone chooses to change to a different support coordinator. As you know, there are different reasons why that might occur, and we have been trying to capture the primary ones in our directive. We specifically have addressed in this directive our instructions for DSPD staff when a support coordinator chooses to start a new contract or change companies or switch for some reason. And our directive has been published out on our website, so you can see there. Also, there's a more thorough, we'll put it into the chat, URL to go and grab it and just get the PDF for that. The one fundamental change in the practice is that DSPD constituent services representatives will be the person's contacting the individual and services to determine their choice. This requires some participation on both sides. Please remember that our internal directive is a procedure for DSPD staff and not a directive or change in regard to contractual obligations of private support coordinators. While we understand that this change in practice can be frustrating, please keep in mind our constituent representatives are an objective party in place to ensure choice. We encourage conversations to continue in regard to any contractual changes that may help address additional issues that arise when a person changes employment. Please remember you can report any contractual violations to the Office of Service Review for follow-up, and you can contact the Office of Service Review at osrprovider@utah.gov, and we will put that into the chat also. Okay, we've got a couple other things to sort of help about access to USDC. So in order to streamline the process and allow everyone an opportunity to request support, we've set up an email to reach out, USDC admins@utah.gov, and that'll be in the chat. This email is checked daily, and there is an option to connect with staff directly if the request needs immediate attention. And so what happens is if you send an email to this, they will check it daily, but you'll get an auto reply with some additional contact information if it's an emergency and can't wait for the day. So the admissions and discharges to and from USDC are outlined in Directive 1.50, transitions between HCBS and USDC. Please feel free to review this directive in order to better understand the process. Our directives are available on our website under internal directives. Again, we'll put this in the chat also. If you have any trouble accessing the information, please reach out to Jamie Withrich directly, and she will try to help out with that. And please note that while the USDC would like to serve everyone in immediate need, they also have the responsibility of ensuring staffing ratios are appropriate and the people residing at USDC are living in a safe and supportive environment. So they'll try to do their best, but they do have some, limitations. Okay, I think I am now going to turn it over to Kristen, and she is going to provide some finance information.
Hey, thanks, Bob. And hi, everyone. We just have a few things from the finance team to go over today. The first one, we've had some questions about PBA. So we just wanted to give just a reminder about PBA. It's the Personal Budget Assistance Service Code to help people with personal financial matters. And it actually covers a range of services from serving as a person's representative payee to ensuring that Medicaid spend downs are paid down on time to providing the person with training, assistance, support, and opportunities to manage finances. So just as a reminder, it can be billed as either a quarter hour or a session rate. And each person will have a different needs and goals regarding personal finance. So the amount of PBA services, it can vary just based on the unique circumstances of the individual. So it's most common, most individuals require 2 sessions a month if the residential provider and the PBA provider are the same company. But it can vary if the individuals have different circumstances, such as using an ABLE account or other time-consuming activities. If the PBA provider is not the same company as the residential provider, the individual and their team should discuss if the quarterly hour service is more appropriate. So just review the individual's goals and needs, and that should be the guide when determining the amount of services requested. If more PBA units or sessions are needed, please submit a RFS request. And in that request, just include the information on the individual circumstances and what services will be provided during the increased PBA units or sessions. And so for more information on the PBA service codes, just please refer to the scope of work on that one. We continue to always get questions about caregiver compensation. So just another reminder that yes, individuals can use the provider model for caregiver compensation. That's fine under Appendix K authority. If additional units are needed though for SL3, support coordinators can request them through RFS. And if they need to use the provider model, they need to then move them using that budget neutral policy to SLN. Since it is a higher cost code for SLN, caregivers who choose this option, maybe it will only have access to fewer hours than if they use the SAS model. So that's just something you need to talk about and discuss with your team. The total SL3 PA hours that can be approved are 40 hours per individual, but do vary based on each individual's unique circumstances. And the reason we need that SL3 PA code used is just to ensure that like all the criteria is met that it's not outlined right now in the SLN code. Next one, monthly budget reviews. We completed the first monthly budget reviews, and thank you to all the support coordinators who participated and helped in those. Everything went really smoothly this month. All identified budgets were able to be reviewed. So you should have been contacted regarding the results of that review. If you have any questions or any concerns, let me know. If any budgets were adjusted through that process, the NOA should have been sent out. So check with your individual and client on your caseload to make sure that they received that. If you weren't contacted or they haven't received their NOAs, just send me an email at kristencornea@utah.gov. And then just be on the lookout each month for that email at the first of the month or log note that will tell you if one of your clients, their case has been tagged for a budget review. There's a really short time frame to return those budget justifications. It's 10 days. So we just want to make sure that you're watching for those and that those get sent in on time. We are still working on switching the whole process to use steps. And so we're going to be sending out an email about that really quickly, about what that process will look like and how to fully integrate that into use steps. Emergency payment policy update. So the updated version of the request for services policy has been published on DSPD's website. I think we'll put that in the chat so you can check that and review it. Not a lot changed this time. The only thing that really changed was an update to the emergency payment policy. The process and documentation for submitting an emergency payment request has not changed. What we have updated is how the RFS committee will verify that a situation requires an emergency payment. So going forward, emergency payments, we're only going to try to approve them when there really has been a documented change in circumstances that necessitate emergency services. So situations like when there's a loss of a caregiver, a change in housing circumstances, or changes in behavioral or medical support needs. The change in circumstance really needs to be documented in an activity log note at the time of the occurrence. Requests will also need to be submitted no more than 90 days after the service provision. We'll also consider it a valid exception if a RFS request has been made at the time of the changes in the circumstances, but for whatever reason, the RFS committee was not able to process the request before the plan closed. So just make sure those RFS requests are really submitted on time when you do see changes in circumstances. We know that really frequently happens around rollovers, and we understand that's outside the control of support coordinators. Again, it should really only be used for true emergencies, the emergency payment or closed plan payment process. Any other request needs to go through RFS process and use steps. We also receive a lot of questions about the budget neutral changes that you can or can't make to a person-centered budget. So in that same policy, we have sections that outline when a budget neutral change can be made and the procedure for making the change. So if you have any questions about that policy, please feel free to reach out to myself or one of the RFS team members or just the policy itself. Next one. So it's been previously announced that there'll be a rate increase for applicable service codes that starts January 1st. And so please just ensure that all of your billings from July through December have been submitted in a timely manner so we can ensure that they get paid before the rollover. And also just so they're eligible for those supplemental payments, since that process will be changing and it will only be the rate increase. We just need to make sure that everyone receives that is entitled to it. So I think that's all the stuff I have today. Thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. Okay, I made a little bit of help here, Katie. So do we have somebody from the State Board of Education that's going to?
Yes, I believe Lavinia
Oh,
is here.
Lavinia.
Yeah,
Lavinia, sorry.
Lavinia. No worries, I'm here, and I believe Crystal.
Yep.
Is here as well, right? Yeah, great.
Are you guys going to be sharing some stuff, or do I need to?
We would love to share our screen, right? Crystal, you'll want to
Yeah.
share yours? Okay.
we just have a few slides to keep us on topic.
So I think I've quit sharing, right? So
Okay, let me get this. Hold on, sorry. There we go. Okay, can you guys see that okay?
Yep, looks good.
Excellent. So I'm Crystal Emery, and this is Lavinia Griffin-Trog. We're both post-secondary transition specialists with Utah State Board of Education. And we have had a really big focus over the last few years on improving our interagency and interdisciplinary collaboration to serve our transition age youth. And we're having a conversation in a meeting recently about, wouldn't it be great if we could spend some time with support coordinators and talk to them about what we're doing? And then I found out about this meeting, so here we are. So we thought today would just be pretty informal, just a discussion around what it is that we do and the mandates that we fall under and how your work fits into those mandates. Lavinia, do you want to say anything else or introduce yourself?
Sure. I'll just quickly introduce myself. Chris already mentioned, my name is Lavinia Griffin-Trog. I've been a transition specialist here at the State Board of Education for a little over 5 years. And then prior to that, I worked as a special ed teacher for over 20 years in several different districts of various disabilities. And then prior to that, I worked actually for our providers, kind of how I started in this field. The other thing I want to mention, I recognize that support coordinators, you serve a variety of ages of individuals, but we always like to say in the transition world that you can never start thinking about transition too early. So if you are serving younger students, we just feel that it's really important that you kind of understand how important transition is in education, and of course how that leads into a productive and meaningful life for individuals with disabilities. So that's all I wanted to say.
Awesome, thank you. So we just have a few slides to share just a little bit about the mandates that we fall under, and then we just wanted to have a discussion with you about how you see your work aligning with our work, and see if we can't take advantage of all of our expertise together. So
do we want to just use the chat feature maybe for this? Because I know there's a number of folks on here, so we could.
Yeah, that'd be great. So in the chat, do you want, if you would just type in there a word or a phrase about what comes to mind when you hear the term post-secondary transition? What do you think about? That requires me to get the chat up. Hold on. Cliff, thanks, Lisa. Post hi.
Yes.
Life skills training for individuals. Planning an adjustment for the person and the family. It is a big adjustment to move into the post-secondary world. Employment training. Thanks, John. Life skills programs, excellent. So go ahead and you can keep adding in your thoughts in here. More independence training, teaching job readiness. Those are absolutely a big part of our mandate, is getting our students ready academically and functionally for their life after school. So, under IDEA, the purpose of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is to ensure that all students with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs. And then this is the big piece, and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living once they leave special education. So our role is to get them ready to be as independent and productive and functional in their chosen environment after school as possible. How would you guys say that aligns with your work? You can use chat or you can unmute. Do we have similar goals? Do you guys do something completely different? What do you think? Okay, if the client has no behavioral challenges, that can be really great. One of the things that is part of the education plan, the individualized education program, right? Program, not plan now.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Used to be plan. It aligns 100%. Thanks, Emily. So one of the goals of an individualized education plan is to address these challenges that these students are facing that will get in the way of some of their post-school goals, hopes, dreams, and plans. So I appreciate you bringing up behavioral challenges, because those are definitely some of the things we need to address to make sure that they're ready for this transition.
And can I interrupt for a second,
Yes,
Chris?
please
I
do.
think, before we kind of move on to what's in the transition mandates and the language and the law and how that is reflected in the transition plan, I do want to mention that I think transition, a large part of this is also really talking about self-determination for individuals, right, that are going through transition. Self-advocacy is a really large part of this. And I think that individualization of transition plans, it's not a one size fits all, and that we really want to start thinking about, despite challenges students have, really starting to think about strengths-based kind of approach, right? Because we know that we're working with students with a lot of challenges, but we really want to zero in, I think, and focus on, how do we build off of these strengths and emerging skills so that students can have successful post-school outcomes.
Excellent. So the next few slides is just going through our kind of legal mandates for transition, giving some definitions, and identifying the pieces of the transition plan. So we're going to do that fairly quickly, but if you have questions, please stop us along the way. But it just gives us a nice foundation to have the remaining conversation. So under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is our special education law, we have federal requirements for creating transition plans and providing transition services. So the term transition services means a coordinated set of activities. So this is that piece, like right from the very beginning, it's about coordination. It's not just a particular protocol or curriculum. It's about a coordinated set of activities that is designed to be results oriented in improving the academic and functional achievement of a child with disability as we facilitate the child's movement from school to post-school activities. So as we are creating transition plans as educators, it's really important for us to be thinking about these functional achievement goals, not just the academic goals, that will help this child move from school to post-school activities. And continuing on with the definition, this could include post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment. So these are the things that we are setting goals with students around, their post-secondary goals around education opportunities and employment goals. And this is for all students with disabilities, not just our mild mod kids, not just those who are easy to get along with, right? These are for all of our students with disabilities need to have a plan that is going to support this movement into education, employment, and independent living later on. So also could include things like continuing or adult education, adult services, independent living opportunities, and community participation.
And I would just add too, under that employment section in parentheses, yes, it says supported employment, but I would even expand that further to say customized employment, especially for our students with significant cognitive disabilities.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. And then just finishing up the definition, these focuses on employment and education need to be based on the student's needs, strengths, preferences, and interests. So we really need to be individualizing services in a way that addresses the child's or the individual's strengths. Like Lavinia was saying, we really want to start with the strengths of the child or the student and their needs. What are their support needs going to be? What are their independence needs? What are their behavioral needs going to be? All of those things. So strengths and needs, and then taking into account preferences and interests. And that could include all sorts of things like instruction, related services, which often in schools we think like school psych, OT, and PT as related services, community experiences, which is where our voc rehab relationships come into play, and also our support coordinators, right? You guys are working on community experiences with your youth that you serve. The development of employment and other post-school adult living objectives, and then if appropriate, which is almost always appropriate, acquisition of daily living skills and functional vocational evaluations. So this is what IDEA says. This is what we are required to address as we are creating transition plans for our youth. Is that we are working on academic and functional achievement based on the students' individual needs, strengths, preferences, and interests related to their goals and activities after school in employment, independent living, and further education. So any questions or comments on that? We're going to keep going. And then, yeah,
I was just gonna add, we transition, post-secondary transition is, kind of just one word. It's typically just one page embedded into a student's IEP, but after going through those 3 slides, you can see that transition really, there's a lot, right, involved in transition, and it's not a solo activity. It's not something that just the special ed teacher is doing all of. It really is that collaborative effort. And so I think we're most successful if we can really blend and braid and work together, right, to provide that student all of those services that they need.
Jackie's asking in the chat, is the student's participation in this program dependent on grades or diagnosis? Lavinia, do you want to talk about eligibility for special education?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So certainly from an education standpoint, we don't diagnose, but we have a process of eligibility into the 13 different categories of disability within IDEA. So information is gathered to make sure that the student is eligible and classified under the appropriate disability category within special education law. So once a student is found eligible for special education services based on that disability and all that comprehensive kind of assessment that happens, then beginning at age 14, it's mandated that the student must have this transition plan embedded into their IEP. So I hope I answered that. So grades have nothing to do with it. It's all based on, there are different criteria for each of those eligibility categories, those disability categories. There are a different set of criteria, and those are all outlined in our special education rules. So I'd be happy to put that into the chat while Crystal is talking.
Awesome, thank you. So this service, special education services, are an entitlement service. So if a child has a disability and they are found to qualify under one of those disability categories, they are entitled to these services while they are in school. And then when they leave school, they move to a system of eligibility. So they have to be eligible for voc rehab. They have to be eligible for DSPD services. But special education is an entitlement for students with disabilities. Does that answer your question, Jackie? Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down.
I just put the rules that I just put the link to our special ed state rules in the chat.
Excellent, thank you. Jackie says she had a client denied special education services based on their grades. That
Yeah, I thought, well, I sometimes think that there is this, you know, oh, the student's doing fine academically, therefore, you know, they shouldn't qualify. That is qualification is an IEP team decision, and it shouldn't be based on grades, right? There's lots of information. So the student could still be doing well or passing their classes and having good grades, but they still might need to might have a need for special education services. For example, you know, maybe it would be a physical need, maybe it's a behavioral need, maybe it's a communication need. So all of those things must be considered, and ultimately is an IEP team decision. Certainly, if there is someone on the IEP team that doesn't agree, you know, there are processes in place for that dispute resolution kind of a process. So a parent can initiate that, and we have all of that dispute resolution information on our website as well.
So yes, definitely if a parent does not agree or another member of the IEP team does not agree with the decision made by the IEP team, there is that process in place to appeal and have further conversation and have a different set of eyes looking at it and make a determination. So if you have had experiences where that's the issue and the family doesn't feel like that's an appropriate determination, then you could refer them to the dispute resolution system to have that appealed. And then
I'll add that as well. I can add that.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And we should also say that the IEP is an entitlement based on whether or not a student falls into a disability category, but also they have to show that their disability is impacting their ability to access education or to be educated, right? With any other, there is a piece of that in there.
Yes. So, I mean, that's kind of the difference between, you know, a student may have a disability, but not require specially designed instruction. So there are students that are on 504 plans, which just allow them to have accommodations based on their disability. But if it is determined that the student needs specially designed instruction based on that disability, then that is kind of the difference there that qualifies them for special education services.
Excellent, thank you. And if you have any further questions or anything, you guys can definitely reach out to us after this if you want to have additional conversation around any of this. Mandy in the chat asked, should the transition plan start after the student turns 14 or in the IEP when the student will turn 14?
Yeah, that's a great question because there's a lot of confusion around that. If the student is 14 at the time of the IEP meeting, there must be a transition plan in place. If the student is still 13 at the time of the IEP meeting, then they do not have to have a transition plan in place, but that's an IEP team decision or an LEA decision, a school district decision. Sometimes they just decide to start transition plans, for example, in grade 8 or in 7. So it's the way that it's written is 14 or earlier, but it is not required until the student is 14 at the time of the meeting.
Excellent, thank you. So as we are creating transition plans, these this current slide tells about the pieces that are required to be in a transition plan. So we have to have appropriate measurable post-secondary goals. We have to have goals for the student that the student is offering input in and helping to set about their goals for life after high school in both areas of education and further employment. There has to be age-appropriate transition assessments updated annually that inform those appropriate measurable post-secondary goals. Transition services, including multi-year courses of study that will help the student work toward meeting those goals when they leave high school. annual IEP goals related to transition services. So the transition services that are deemed necessary to support the student in working toward their post-secondary goals. There needs to be an annual IEP goal, something that's going to be worked on during that IEP year related to those services that were deemed necessary. Evidence that the student was involved in the IEP meeting if transition was discussed, and evidence of any participating agency that was invited to the IEP team meeting with prior. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That's my dog. So I'm going to kick him out, and while I do, Lavinia, maybe you could lead this discussion on where do support coordinators fit into these pieces of the transition plan.
Yes, definitely. So just to clarify, maybe the first square there, I guess, or a rectangle, appropriate measurable post-secondary goals. So if you're not familiar with those, so these are those big future goals. So let's say the student is in 9th grade and we are talking about what is the student going to be doing in terms of employment or further education and training and independent living after they leave the school district. So that could be at 18, but in most cases, you know, our students with more significant cognitive disabilities are probably staying in schools until age 22. So even though the student might be in 8th grade, those measurable post-secondary goals are goals for that future. That's after they turn 22 and have left the school. So, you know, I think that's really where you might fit in. I think there are a number of areas where you could fit in, but it's kind of helping shape that future for the student and having input there in terms of what they might be doing for employment or post-secondary further education and training and independent living. Also, the second one, transition assessment. It is not just one assessment. It's not a one size fits all. It's this ongoing gathering of information around the student's strengths, interests, preferences, and needs. So I certainly see where support coordinators probably have a lot of assessment information about the student that would be really valuable, I think, to inform the transition plan. Another example would be the blue box here, transition services. So these are, what are those experiences, could be work-based learning experiences, what are specific instruction that the student might need, related services to help them reach those post-secondary goals. So there's a lot, I feel there's a lot of areas that you probably can fit in and really add to and enhance the student's transition plan. But if anyone has any other ideas, go ahead and put those in the chat.
And I'd be curious to know how many of you have worked as part of an IEP team helping to develop a transition plan. And you could use the reactions and just do like a hand up or something. Jackie raised her hand. Thanks, Jackie. Ramona, Mandy. Okay. Good, Brooke, John. So quite a few of you are working with these transition age youth and have been a part of this process. So those of you who have been a part of this process, can you give examples maybe of things that you have brought to the IEP meeting with the students that you're working with that the IEP team probably wouldn't have had without this interagency collaboration and you being involved? Any thoughts? Think of anything, you can put it in the chat. And we will keep going. So one of the other things that we wanted to do, besides making sure that you as support coordinators are aware that you can play a critical role in supporting these youth as they receive the education services that they need to transition successfully into their life after school, is to share with you some of the resources that we have as a state that might be able to help you in that effort, and also just in your work with transition age youth in general. So So we have several Padlets that, and I wasn't planning on spending any time actually diving through these today, but I just want to make you aware of them. And then I will make sure that this slide deck gets to you guys so that you can have access to these links. But we have a collaboration Padlet. Oh, awesome. Thanks, Lavinia. I was just putting them in the chat as well. So building transition teams and the different roles of the different transition collaborators is the focus of this transition team collaboration Padlet. So there's a lot of resources for collaboration there between agencies in support of these youth. We have a Padlet around the transition process. So some of the slides that we shared today came out of that realm, just understanding what the requirements are for transition planning for youth. So understanding the transition process as support coordinators could really help you, help them self-advocate, and also help you know what the student is entitled to or what they need and what the requirements are so that you can support that process from your side as well. We have transition talks, which are just little 30-minute, sometimes they're an hour, but they're short presentations on a variety of topics around post-secondary transition. And so there's a Padlet that just has a link to all of those different, there's all sorts of different topics from the transition plan to, my mind just went blank. Lavinia, some other topics for transition topics?
So certainly, breaking down the components of the transition plan that we just had in the slide previous to this, so kind of diving a little bit deeper into those components. Also, we talk about indicator 14, which is our post-school outcomes. So we every year do a very large survey to survey what our students are doing a year after they leave LEAs. So that's super important data for us as a state and for LEAs. We want to see better outcomes. We need to see our students engaged in employment and further education and training. So there's some information about that. We also have some on self-determination and self-advocacy being such an important theme in transition. And there are more, but those are the ones that I can think of.
So there's a question in the chat about what is a Padlet, and it's basically like a really cool bulletin board where you can bring information together on a topic and share it widely. And so this is a tool that as a Utah State Board of Ed transition team, we found this, Vinny and Deanna found these Padlets and this tool and have created multiple topics to support our different stakeholders. So I should be sharing my screen right now for the transition elevated app. And so Deanna, or sorry, Lavinia, do you want to talk about the app? And
oh, sure. Yeah. So a couple of years ago, in an effort to try to increase student self-determination and also student-driven IEP plans, transition plans, we worked with a developer to create a transition elevated planning app. So the app really is intended for students and families, because we recognize that some students won't be able to necessarily use it independently, but it's also a great tool for families that are sort of unfamiliar with all of the things involved in transition planning. So the app is free and you don't need an account. It's very simple to use. So a student, and with the help of an educator or a family or even a support coordinator, could go in and answer questions, essentially 15 questions, which then automatically generates a draft transition plan. And embedded in that are links to our major agencies such as DSPD, for example, VR, other agencies throughout the state, and has tips on how to really run a successful transition plan. So it also has a frequently asked questions document, because there is so much involved in transition, and a lot of times family, students, and outside agency providers don't really understand transition. So we embedded a really nice frequently asked questions document in the app as well. A student and or family member can go into the app as many times as they want. It takes maybe about 10 minutes. Like I said, there's no password. So if they want to do it 5 times before the IEP, then that's absolutely fine. At the end, when that draft plan is generated, it can be printed or it can be emailed and shared out with the rest of the IEP team.
And this is something that we thought as support coordinators, you might be interested in accessing or supporting your students that you serve in going through this process. And then just by way of explaining Padlets, on the screen, you have the post-secondary transition elevated planning app Padlet. And there are different columns with different information. This is the link to the app itself if you're going to do it on a computer. There's a demo video. So there's just a lot of information and resources around the app itself. Frequently asked questions document. So that's what a Padlet is it's just a repository to have a topic and to build in resources and information around that topic. And so the 4 Padlets that we have listed here are ones that we thought that you might be interested in the information that's available to you on them. Any other questions?
Just our contact information. Do you want to show that last slide?
I can get back, there we are. Excellent. So this is how you would reach, oh my heavens, we forgot to fix this yesterday. My phone number is wrong here, so I will fix it and add it to the chat. Email is usually better anyway, but I will put my work phone number in the chat.
Yeah, so if you have, any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you have around post-secondary transition.
And we are excited to spend a little bit of time with you today and hopeful that, that this is the beginning of some good working relationships and our ability to work together to support these students. So thank you so much for letting us take some time in your meeting. Any thoughts or questions? Anything else?
Thank you guys so much. It is so important that we're all working together, and that's really great. Appreciate it. If any questions come up, folks, just go ahead and put them in the chat. That'd be great. Okay. Okay. We're kind of winding down, but we've had a few questions submitted to us, and let's see if we can answer some of those. We have got a question on caregiver compensation. It refers to the Social Services Appropriations Subcommittee, which I did not attend, so I can't address that part. But there's a multi-part question here. The first part is if caregiver compensation does continue, what parameters is DSPD exploring to ensure it is not taken advantage of and is actually the service delivery model that the client wants? So we are actively exploring what caregiver compensation would look like if it were to become permanent ongoing service. So our process for developing new caregiver compensation policy includes holding input sessions with parents and people with disabilities, as well as engaging in a monthly caregiver compensation coalition meeting that includes stakeholders, families, support coordinators, and lawmakers. Some of the changes that we are considering include moving from a quarter-hour service to a monthly or weekly service and developing guided questions to ensure that service is truly in the best interest of the person and that the service reflects the person's choice. And if you would like to be involved in the Caregiver Compensation Coalition, please contact Janet Wade at janetwade@hotmail.com. And I don't know, Katie, can we maybe put that into the chat? That would be great. The second part of that question is it possible for DSPD to issue an email to the 792 individuals that are currently using this service that 40 hours per week of SL3 is not guaranteed, especially when the client is attending a day program or a school full-time? So we have communicated with families in services about not being guaranteed 40 hours. We'll continue to look for opportunities to educate people about caregiver compensation requirements. And we plan to go over our information in our upcoming quarterly meeting with families. We'll put a link in the chat with answers to some of the frequently asked questions about caregiver comp, and that you can use this information as you get questions also. There's a question also about the NOA showing up in use steps, and I believe it's in the context of the budget utilizations. And so the answer is for the NOAs related to the budget utilization reviews, we will still need to reach out to Kristen Cornea at utah.gov is our email to receive a copy of the NOA. We're working towards integrating the process in use steps. And one of the goals is to have the NOAs also integrated into that section. And I can just let you guys know, we are working on trying to automate it so that we don't have this big process that was once a year, spreading it out over the month, or sorry, spreading it out over the 12 months for people that fall into that spot where they haven't been utilizing their budget for 2 years. And it'll include both automated notifications and a place for people to put their response, if they need to make a response. And I don't know if I'd call it an appeal, but anyway, add into why that funding needs to remain in place. So we are in the process of building that system, and hopefully in the next 3 or 4 months, we'll have that out there. There's another question about what are the codes that will be getting the rate adjustment in January. And so support coordination services will increase from 4.46% of an increase to 5%. And the other providers, which was most of the services, will increase. They already increased from 3.65% to, and they'll go up to 4.18%. There will be an updated rate master sheet that will be uploaded into our DSPD website to show all of this information. So anyway, just I guess the heads up about this, by the way, is I'm going to say unfortunately, but we will be doing a rollover in January. So I'm going to throw out the first plug right there to just say that'll mean that we need to get all of the services for, services delivered in, through December to get all of those submitted in the first 2 weeks of January. So you guys know that causes a lot of messes. Rollovers are difficult anyway. Okay, I think that's the last question that we could answer. There is at least one other question. We'll have to send that out to you guys. And Angie, you're back. I don't know if you want to kind of finish introducing yourself or not. Tyler kind of jumped in to let a little bit of people know just a little bit about the study that led to your new position and group. But I just saw you take yourself off mute, so I'll let you say hi.
Yes, thank you very much. So we're fully operational here up at the Mace Hub. So thank heavens, sorry for the little misfunction earlier, but thank you so much. So Tyler did explain kind of where the position came from. So it really is a brand new position. So we're building it from the ground up. We're taking concerns as they come our way and working with the constituent services with DSPD to make sure we're handling things that are under our scope and not handling things that would be more appropriately handled through DSPD constituent services or the Office of Licensing or some other forum. So looking forward to that. Personally, I am in a telework position, as I stated, so I'm up in the Salt Lake area on Wednesdays and Thursdays. I'm happy to meet or visit or get to know anyone who might be in the area. Please feel free to stop by. My experience, my work experience, I've been with the department for 25 years, specifically with the juvenile justice system. So my specific experience with children with disabilities comes through working with those that touch the juvenile justice system. My lived experience is specifically tied to traumatic brain injury, as well as raising a son on the autistic spectrum. So that's kind of my personal side. But any input or comments or concerns, any interest you have in knowing a little bit more about the Ombuds program, please feel free to send me a note or share any thoughts that you might have that that we can address. So any questions? I did share my contact information in the chat, or I think I shared it with Katie to share in the chat. Okay, well, can get back to Bob.
Thanks, Angie, and welcome back. All right, folks. I think that is everything. We've got one other question that we're going to have to send out about Directive 1.54. I don't want to make up an answer. And so I'm going to...
There was actually one more question that just came in for Angie.
Oh, okay.
What the ombudsman does.
So if you look at the Ombud services through that the department offers, the disability being a brand new one, we also have a child protection ombudsman, and that team specifically deals with complaints against DCFS or concerns, we might say, against rights and their practice model. We have a ombuds that oversees state long-term care programs, specifically our nursing homes and our assisted living centers, that deals primarily with complaints coming from the residents. The disabilities ombudsman is going to look a little bit different. We will not necessarily be handling complaints from DSPD clients, about DSPD services. We will more specifically be dealing with basically any citizen in the state of Utah that has a disability and whose rights are not being attended to. And our initial focus is going to be specifically on access and a right to access. So did that cover the question? And if I can drop my email. I have my email and my phone number as well.
Thanks, Angie.
Thanks, Bob.
Are there other questions that I didn't see coming through? Okay, of course, you guys can email us anytime. So just to wind up, our next support coordinator quarterly will be January 18th at 11:30. And next month on November 9th, we'll have the Family and Self-Advocate quarterly. And as we typically do, we'll have a session at 11:30 and then an evening session at 6:30. So I want to thank everybody for joining us and hope you all have a great day. Thanks.
Bob?
Yep.
Just really quick, there are a couple of more comments left to that. And I think the easiest way, the code for this is 62A-5-501. I think that would give everybody a good sense of kind of what we're looking at without referencing it right now specifically. But I think as you're dealing with the DSPD clients at this point, I think the best option is to work through the DSPD current infrastructure for handling any concerns to make sure what we're Brenda. I don't know if you guys know Brenda Carlisle, but we are working together, and anything that would not be normally handled through the DSPD constituent concerns process will be funneled over to me to figure out. So if you have any questions, like I said, right now we're really focusing on access rights. So access, to public buildings, to transportation, and things of that nature. So to the question about if the human rights question, if it pertains to DSPD individual, then it remains with constituent services at DSPD. I would start there, yes. And if that's something that's determined by Brenda to be outside of that scope, then it would be sent over to me.
And then Bob, it looks like our last question is about when new steps will be available. Do you have any idea?
I didn't realize it was down because I'm here, but I'm gonna guess it's the same statewide network problems that we're having. So I did see an email that they're working on it. So I don't really know. I'm sorry. Question above that Denise asked. Denise, can you just re-ask your question, or maybe it's too long?
Yeah, I was just asking for clarification about the ARPA payments. If we did, if we filled out that form in U-Steps, is that what the attestation is?
So there was a form put in, but then it had to be submitted to the health department, right?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking. I filled out a form in U-Steps and then I did get one quarterly payment. So I'm assuming that's all I needed to do.
Yeah,
But I
that
just
should,
want you to clarify that that's what you were talking about in the most recent email.
yes, that is it. That's the attestation. Yes.
In U-Steps. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
and so
you.
if you've done it and you received that payment, then yes, you're good to go.
Okay, and those are paid quarterly?
Yeah, so there's another run that should be happening. I actually think it's this week or it'll be next week, I guess. You know what? I'm honestly not sure if it's tonight or if it's next Wednesday that it'll be run. And then there will be one in January. And I think that they're planning to do a follow-up kind of a cleanup in February that will catch everything. And then that's what the rate increase will then end, right? That's part of what that rate increase is for, is so that we won't, it is the ARPA funding, but there won't be those quarterly payments anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and by the way, feel free to reach out if I'm not being clear or something, and we can look up and make sure everything's good for you. But you didn't have to redo a new attestation.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, folks. Thanks again for being here. And so we've got the next support coordinator in a quarterly meeting in January, and the family and self-advocate next month on November 9th.
We had one more question coming. It's probably the last question we have time for before we're out of time. And I don't know if Kristen is still on, but they're asking about the metrics for the RFS committee. I don't think Kristen is on. Mike, would you be able to just put your contact information in the chat or private message it to me, and we will make sure that we respond to your question?
I'm afraid to say, okay, thanks, folks, because we'll get another question that I keep missing.
And if anyone else has questions that didn't get answered during this meeting or we didn't get around to, go ahead and send them to that same email address I just put in the chat, dspdinfo@utah.gov, and we will get back with you.
Thanks, Katie. All right, thanks, everybody. Have a great day.